This is Dr. Anna Maria Helt here at Osada Natural Health in Durango, and unfortunately my sidekick Milo is not here today to be in the video. And so every once in a while I like to put out a video that talks about respiratory support. And we are now in our sort of second phase of wildfire season, it seems, here in Colorado. There are multiple fires burning in this state. There are multiple fires burning all over California and elsewhere in the West. As I look out my window here, it's very hazy outside. The sky is overcast with smoke, so much so that the sun is a lovely color orange. But I know I'm feeling it in my lung and sinuses, and a lot of my clients are as well. So this is just a friendly neighborhood and big neighborhood reminder of some things you can do to help support the health of your lungs, because that part, the fine particulates that is smoke, that can damage your lungs and really irritate your lungs. So we want to take care of our lungs, especially in this era of COVID. So in general right now, some things you can do to help, just before I get to herbs, eating things like vitamin C, antioxidant rich foods right now can be helpful. In general, that's helpful, not just now, but right now, particularly important. So, you know, the whole eat a rainbow idea, lots of colorful fruits and vegetables, and smoothies, salads, soups, stews, curries, just as sautés or roasted vegetables. Great way to get those in. Right now would not be the time to be burning candles inside, burning incense inside. If you're somewhere that's cool, having a fire in your fireplace, because that just increases the amount of particulates that your lungs are having to deal with when they're already dealing with particulates, if you're in any of these areas that are burning. Right now may not be a bad time to be wearing a mask. Aside from the pandemic, it can, at least to some extent, reduce the amount of particulates going in your lungs. And it would be something that would have to be really close fitting. A loose fitting mask isn't going to do much in terms of the smoke with respect to your lungs. And then when you're out and about and you're coming back home, take off your outer layers when you're coming inside. A shawl, a jacket, an outer layer of a shirt, or just strip down butt naked if you're going home and there's privacy, because that will mean you're bringing less smoke particulates or fewer smoke particulates into the house with you. So just some basic tips there. I'm going to talk about herbs. If you've seen one of my fire videos before, you're probably going to know the herbs I'm going to talk about. I'm going to start with mullein, which is a weed that grows all over the place in North America. Most places, not everywhere. But this is a great one to use. The leaves and the roots and the flowers can be used, but what's easiest and usually most available would be the leaves. So look for nice, undamaged, healthy looking leaves. Some people like to get the younger, smaller leaves. Some people like the bigger leaves. I just kind of get whatever I have access to as long as they look healthy. You want to give them a wash because they're going to be growing in a basal rosette above the ground, and they tend to be dirty, especially if there's been a big rainstorm splashing dirt up around them. So give them a good wash in clean water, and then you can wring them out really well and lay them out in a single layer to dry until they're really crispy. My last big, beautiful batch of mullein leaf that I harvested earlier this summer, I thought they were completely dried, and I stuck them in my jar, and lo and behold, they weren't completely dry, and they molded, which was sad. So make sure they're completely dry, but not so dry as to that they're turning tan or brown. At that point, they're not very useful. So they should be nice and crispy. And if you do live in, say, California, closer to the coast where the humidity tends to be a bit higher, what you can do to make sure your stuff is completely dry, because I know it's trickier there, is just take some of the leaf and put it in a little jar and look the next day for condensation inside the jar. And if you see any of that moisture, it means your leaves aren't quite dry yet. So mullein leaf can be used as a tincture, but it really is best as a tea. It can be used as a smoke, but right now you don't want to smoke your mullein leaf. That's going to make it a hotter herb instead of a neutral cooling herb. It's going to make it a drying herb instead of a somewhat moistening herb. So we want it as a tea. And in general, for tea making, when you're making a medicinal tea, that's 1 teaspoon of crushed whatever you're using per every 8 ounces of hot water. You want to steep mullein leaf for at least 15 minutes to have a medicinal strength tea. And you can actually make a few days worth of your tea and keep it in the fridge and then just drink, a few cups of that a day is needed. So mullein leaf is a very gentle, mild expectorant. So if you've got mung in your lungs that you want to try to get out, mullein can help bring that up. But it's also soothing. It's a demulcent herb. It's a very mildly slimy herb that can help with the dryness that often accompanies breathing in wildfire smoke. So together that can help with the expulsion of some of the drier mucus that you might be getting in your respiratory system when you're breathing in smoke during the summer. Mullein also reduces airway inflammation and irritation. It has mild bronchial relaxing properties, so it can help open up your airways to ease breathing, especially for people that are having difficulty breathing. This can be great when you're wheezy. And it's also just relaxing in terms of your nervous system. Not overtly, you're not going to fall asleep during the day if you're drinking this tea, but it's just gently soothing. And this is a good one, especially for people that have pre-existing respiratory stuff going on, whether it's COPD, like my dad used to have, or asthma, emphysema, a history of smoking, a history of working in a dusty environment. Mullein can be really useful just as a long-term tonic for you folks, but especially right now in supporting yourself. Now, let's see. What else do I want to say about mullein? I think I'll leave it at that. This is something, the leaves are something you do want to make sure you strain well before you drink your tea because they're very hairy. And those hairs are in part what help trigger a nervous system response that can help us clear some stuff. But they're annoying in large quantities. So you want to really filter your tea well through maybe something like a muslin cloth or a clean cotton cloth, something like that. And sorry if I seem a little drowsy. It's only Wednesday and it's already been a 30+ hour work week. So I'm a bit loopy right now. So strain it, otherwise it's going to be really annoying. And, for this and the next plant, they're pretty easy to identify, but you really need to know your plant if you are going to go out and harvest this yourself. Mullein leaf is easy to get a hold of, though, from the good herb companies out there that will provide either organically grown if they're growing it on their farm or wild harvested mullein leaf. But know your plant. I know one person who's mistaken mullein leaf with hound's tongue, which is toxic. Both of the leaves from mullein and from hound's tongue are a little bit furry, and they don't really look that much alike. But if somebody's not paying attention and are not well versed in these plants, you could maybe make a mistake like that. So if you're going to go out and wild harvest this, just know for sure what you're harvesting. One trick with mullein is to look for the big flowering stalks from the previous year's plants. They'll be brown. Or look for this year's flowering stalks. That'll be green, maybe with yellow flowers on it. And then pick from around that. Pick the leaves from a non-flowering plant, though. Those are going to have the best medicine with respect to mullein. Now, another great plant are those in the mallow family. So here's some wild mallow leaf and root that I've harvested. This one's getting a little long in the tooth. Once your dried rose have been sitting around for more than about a year, they're mostly compost, unless we're talking about roots. But that's another class. And so wild mallow, the one I picked was Malva neglecta. There's many types of wild mallow. Mallow dissecta or Malva dissecta. There's Althea officinalis, which is marshmallow itself, the most famous member of the mallow family in terms of medicine and the most common one you'll see in herb books. But marshmallow is a European native. You don't tend to see it growing around here in North America unless it's a garden escapee. So we have lots of wild mallow here in Durango and in the Four Corners area in terms of Malva neglecta. Hollyhock is another one that's popular around here. A lot of people grow it in their garden, and you can also use that the same way as you would any of these other mallows. Cheeseweed, which is Malva parviflora, is another great wild mallow you could use, and there's so many others. And it's the leaves and the flowers and the root. Basically, you can use the whole plant. If you're feeling lazy or in a rush, just pick the leaves. They're going to be demulcent. They're going to be soothing. The root is going to be very demulcent and soothing, so you can use that as well, or either one. And so this is a great plant or family of plants for dry, irritated airways, especially if your throat is starting to get irritated as well. It's a good plant for chronic airway inflammation and acute mucous membrane issues as well. And while you can prepare it as a tea, the way I described for mullein, I think the best way, and many herbalists think the best way to do mallow is to actually do a cold infusion. And all that simply means is you're putting your herb, the same ratio, about a teaspoon per 8 ounces, into room temperature water and letting it sit with a lid on overnight, and then strain it the next morning. And that'll give you a really soothing, kind of thick preparation. And you can make a few days worth, just like with mullein, and keep it in the fridge and use it from there for a few days. You can also eat mallow leaves and flowers. They're great in smoothies. They're great as additions to salads, and so that's another way that you can use them. Now, again, wild mallow, like mullein, is widespread in many places of the temperate world. Just make sure you really know what you're doing if you're harvesting it. Otherwise, you can get mallow or mullein at most local herb shops and at the good reputable sellers online to get your herbs. Very picky about herb sources. Some other great supportive plants to consider would be elderflower, which you can use. It's great as a tea. In general, when you're working with respiratory issues, teas are a very good way to go, but tinctures are fine as well. Liquid extracts are fine. Just put them in some water and go at it that way. But elderflower is going to be a cooling, soothing, anti-inflammatory ally for your airways. Schisandra berry, I actually have some here as a glycerite. I'm not a big glycerite fan, but I need a glycerite this time around. So there's Schisandra macerating. This is a great lung tonic. So this is something that you can use kind of longer term. It is a bit warming. It is a bit astringent. So maybe not a bad idea to consider mixing it with a moistening herb, or using it together with a moistening herb like mallow, or like, I just told you I was tired, like mullein or mallow, or maybe with just a little bit of licorice. But anyway, Schisandra is a really great lung tonic, and it's great as a lung qi tonic from a Chinese perspective. And so it might be good as part of a formula. I think it tastes wonderful. Not everybody agrees, but it's got a really interesting taste. It's got 5 different flavors: sweet, sour, bitter, kind of salty, mineral, sweet, sour, bitter, salty, mineral, and there's one I'm missing at the moment that I don't really feel like putting a lot of thought into. And then licorice, since I mentioned it, here's a jar I have of licorice extract. You can't really see the color because the bottle's brown. Very sweet. I'm not a big fan of the licorice flavor, and licorice actually does not taste like aniseed like most people think licorice tastes like. Licorice just tastes really sweet. But it can be good to make your formulas taste better. I don't ever use licorice as a single herb, but this can be another great soothing respiratory tonic. It has some antiviral properties. It has some immune strengthening properties, as well as being anti-inflammatory. So that's kind of an amphoteric quality of licorice. And slightly moistening, so slightly soothing for dry, irritated, or I should say soothing for dry, irritated lungs. Don't use licorice if you have hypertension or a tendency to edema. And again, don't use it as a straight herb. You can run into electrolyte imbalances doing that long term. I've never run into a problem using licorice for myself or for my clients, but I only ever use it as part of a formula, so whether it's part of a tea blend or as part of an extract blend or a tincture blend. And in terms of that, I use it as 5 to 10% of that blend. You don't need a lot of licorice to get its benefits. So maybe you could blend it with some Schisandra. That would taste good. Some other support would be mushrooms, actually. Oyster mushroom and shiitake mushroom are good for respiratory support. They also have some antiviral effects in terms of just trying to keep your lungs and airways as healthy as possible. They help strengthen your immune system while toning down excess inflammatory responses and such. So these could be slow-acting lung tonics. You could just eat them. Food is medicine, and it's getting easier and easier to get mushrooms like shiitake and even oyster mushrooms at the market and eat them cooked, a few times a week. Or you can look and find a double extract of these, which is a combination tincture decoction that some companies will sell. But always look up brand reviews, know what you're getting when you're buying something. I will be teaching mushroom medicine making, I believe in February. I'll post it up on my website, but it'll be February sometime on a Saturday. It's going to be a medicinal mushrooms of the Rocky Mountains class that I'm teaching through Albuquerque Herbalism for the wonderful herbalist Dara Seville in New Mexico. So you could also look up Albuquerque Herbalism and find it on her site. I will post it on my own site. Actually, I already have posted it on my own site, osada.com. It is about to get updated, so if you don't get to Osada your first try, check back in a day or two, as I'm finally updating my 10-year-old website. I'm a Luddite. Actually, I'm not updating it. Somebody else is. Anyway, mushrooms. Now, another great herb that I love personally, and one of my main teachers uses in most, if not all, of her respiratory formulas, is elecampane, Inula helenium. This is a great lung tonic in small amounts, especially for deep-seated stuff. It is warming, it is drying, but if you use it as just a small part of a formula, you can balance that out. I love elecampane. I use it myself, especially because I live at 6,500 feet in a dusty town. So this can help with either copious quantities of mucus in the lungs, but it can also be useful as part of a blend for hard, sticky mucus, which is often what you're going to be dealing with in wildfire season. So elecampane, I don't use it as a single herb. Very rarely I use it as a single herb. I'll usually use it in a blend of a few herbs, and it can be just a small part of that blend, up to maybe 20% or so, or 15% if you tend to be a warmer person, and then balance it out with a cooling herb, elderflower and stuff. And if I'm freaking you out in terms of talking about formulating, if you're not super experienced with herbs, just pick one of the herbs I've been talking about. Pick mallow or mullein, whatever sounds like it might fit you, or maybe pick two things. Or eat some mushrooms and do either mullein or mallow. You don't have to worry about formulating if that feels like it's a bit intimidating for you. Now, I want to just finish up with just a couple ideas on aromatherapy. Some soothing essential oils in, maybe it depends right now. Like, see what a steam feels like for you. For some people, the warmth of it might be annoying, but for others, that steam can really help break up stuck, dried mucus in your respiratory tract. So what you would do is boil some water on a stove, pour it in a heavy bowl, like a ceramic bowl or like a heavy glass, thick Pyrex bowl, and let it cool for just a bit so that it's not super, super hot, but while it's still steaming, add some essential oils to it, maybe just a few drops of something to help clear and soothe your airways. And so a little bit of German chamomile, and I mean a little bit because that stuff's expensive, maybe just a drop of that can be a great one. Some English lavender, Lavandula angustifolia, can be a great one for soothing all of your airways. If you really need some clearing out, you're super stuffy, something like pine or fir or eucalyptus could be good options to try. And diffusing is fine as well. I just am not a big fan of people diffusing constantly all day long, because then your liver has to deal with metabolizing those essential oils. But you could diffuse off and on all day. I really like a steam. And just for me, I find it more effective in kind of clearing things out. And, you'll have to do it regularly. One steam is great, but in a few hours, if it's really smoky where you are, or later on in the day, you may notice some irritation again. So maybe a couple of steams a day for some aromatherapy. And it doesn't have to be with essential oils. It can also be with plants. So if you have some lavender growing, or you have a pine tree nearby, etc., you could just throw a handful of those herbs into your hot water and put your face over the water, not in it, put your face over the water, put a towel over your head, over that bowl, and then just breathe it in for 5 to 10 minutes. And I am going to shut up because this is going on almost 20 minutes now. And so if you've managed to make it to the end, thank you. Good for you. For anybody who wants more specific support or you're intimidated in figuring this out by yourself, I am doing telehealth now in the era of COVID, and am doing taking long distance clients, which I didn't really used to do much of in the past. So if you want more specific support for you in terms of your lungs, PM me or go on to OSADA and contact me that way. Or you can email me at Maria, Marija, at OSADA, OSAD as in dog, HA.com. So be well, everybody. Be safe out there and take care of yourselves. Stay hydrated.